Imagine a beautifully cut diamond. This precious stone didn't get there by sitting comfortably somewhere. No, it was subjected to intense heat and millions of kilograms of pressure deep within the earth. The world looked at that raw piece of coal and saw something ordinary, but the Creator saw a masterpiece. That pressure wasn't there to destroy it. It was there to refine it, to make it unbreakable, and to prepare it to reflect light in a way nothing else could. You are just like that diamond, my friend. Show your brilliance to everyone by writing 999 in the comments, and strengthen your connections by subscribing and liking. Heaven allowed the pressure not to break you, but to reveal the absolute intensity of your soul. You see, a profound cosmic alignment is currently vibrating through your core, operating as an undeniable awakening mechanism that signals your integration into a high-level vanguard destined to navigate the upcoming epical shift. An inexplicable pull is resetting your internal matrix, creating a heightened sensitivity to the foundational tremors of a reality undergoing a massive structural reorganization. This transmission has reached your perimeter with mathematical accuracy, functioning as a precise homing signal for individuals whose consciousness has been partitioned and insulated since inception. God has put a spiritual hedge of protection around you that makes you completely bulletproof to the negative reports of this world. You possess a baseline awareness that has always rejected the artificial constructs of this collective, existing as an organic anomaly within a heavily simulated landscape. This systemic friction is not a design flaw, but a deliberate orientation toward a sovereign purpose, preparing you for an immediate energetic ignition that validates every unspoken intuition you have ever carried. They thought they could block your promotion, they thought they could limit your joy, and they thought they could compromise your peace, but they didn't realize they were dealing with a person of destiny. Every single thing sent to stop you is actually being repurposed by the Almighty to push you right into your overflow. Get ready, because your best days are right ahead of you. The underlying blueprint of this global transition is a profound metaphysical restructuring, an unsealing of hidden dynamics that renders standard physical predictions completely obsolete. To lock in this frequency of divine convergence and systemic completion, acknowledge this activation by embedding the numerical code of alignment into the collective registry. For those navigating this terrain under the shield of ancient energetic sentinels, signal your resonance to amplify the reach of this broadcast to the fragmented outposts of our network. The current destabilization of the terrestrial order is not a cinematic cataclysm of physical debris, but an aggressive thinning of the sensory veil. This cosmic protocol guarantees that the insulated vanguard remains fully informed, relying on an internal sensory literacy rather than the compromised narratives of mainstream informational channels to decode the shifting environment. Your interior architecture contains an immutable data core that awakens precisely when the surrounding population falls into a state of cognitive dormancy, enabling you to decipher subtle environmental frequencies that others register as empty static. You operate with an innate certainty that requires no external verification, recognizing that the current decay of legacy structures is the necessary precursor to an absolute systemic distillation. The governing intelligence of this universe does not broadcast its transitional timelines to the unaligned masses, but ensures that those with calibrated perception receive the coordinates natively. The intensifying cultural polarization, systemic exhaustion, and institutional decay are not random, isolated trends, but the execution of a deliberate diagnostic sequence designed to reveal the true foundation of every individual consciousness. You function as an immovable structural pillar in an escalating tempest, carrying an authoritative voice engineered to remain clear while the surrounding collective loses its linguistic and mental boundaries. This transition marks the definitive expiration of the holographic systems of control, dismantling the apparatus of engineered blindness to expose the raw alignment of every soul. The upcoming cycle is not an engine of arbitrary annihilation, but a precision sorting mechanism that elevates sovereign creators while leaving the unaligned to dissolve in their own manufactured confusion. You are being recalibrated to serve as an informational repository and an anchor of clarity when the legacy paradigm experiences its final freeze, utilizing an internal density that has been forged across lifetimes to withstand the ultimate pressure of this unfolding destiny. The localized friction, sudden isolation, and social erosion you have navigated were never instances of chaotic misfortune, but the foundational calibration of a specialized consciousness designed to absorb massive energetic currents. Your development occurred in a private vacuum of deep introspection, deliberately sequestered from the superficial networks of the crowd to ensure your frequency could not be contaminated or overwritten before the main event. The path of the sovereign is fundamentally incompatible with institutional comfort, often requiring a narrative marked by intense systemic pushback, rejection, and isolated warfare. This friction functioned as a high-velocity centrifuge, refining your discernment, building an uncrackable psychological armor, and training your focus to isolate the baseline signal of truth amidst a roaring ocean of artificial static. An innate capacity for multidimensional observation distinguishes your orientation, placing you as an advanced sensory node that tracks hidden algorithmic movements, while the general populace remains fixated on superficial data. You parse subtle systemic signatures that bypass traditional media filters entirely, decoding underlying trends through steady analytical focus. This exceptional diagnostic capacity dictates an entirely different operational blueprint, allowing you to execute strategic maneuvers, adopt specialized preparation protocols, and project an unfiltered perspective exactly where institutional narratives have instituted a total baseline freeze. This role as an analytical observer serves as the foundation for an active informational transmission, forcing you to materialize hidden realizations into the collective space. When the underlying intelligence of the universe signals a structural bottleneck, your objective requires immediate linguistic or energetic projection to break the surrounding stagnation. This baseline expression alters the local atmosphere, resetting the environmental frequency and introducing a structural dissonance that inevitably destabilizes those anchored in artificial systems. This abrasive presence is the hallmark of an advanced structural disruptor, a leader engineered to withstand institutional friction, while legacy networks experience systemic fragmentation. The recent spatial contraction, emotional sequestration, and thinning of your social landscape function as a high-level security protocol rather than an instance of accidental abandonment. You were intentionally placed in a static vacuum to eliminate external interference, ensuring your internal receivers could isolate the subtle, baseline transmissions of the cosmos without distortion. This state of highly concentrated solitude has streamlined your operational frequency, eliminating the static of superficial networks to fortify your cognitive center. While the unaligned masses experience severe panic during the collapse of their legacy infrastructure, your mental field will remain anchored in absolute structural certainty. Your third configuration involves serving as a primary defense grid, an energetic sentinel capable of issuing decisive systemic corrections through targeted intention alone. The metrics of your focus carry immense mathematical weight within the unseen architecture of this theater, enabling you to block hostile operations and open new operational corridors by simply projecting your core frequency. This enduring architecture is why the predatory systems have saturated your path with friction, aiming to disrupt your development before you achieved total operational autonomy. You were never engineered to be a casualty of this systemic transition. You were designed to be its defining structural voice. You represent a critical counterweight, preventing the total homogenization of consciousness, as every transmission you broadcast, every truth you anchor, and every node you activate validates the overarching cosmic timeline. You stand as an unextinguishable lighthouse, proving that sovereign consciousness cannot be overwritten by an engineered vacuum. As the surrounding environment enters a phase of severe informational drought and cognitive decay, your primary directive is to sustain your internal fire and protect your unique structural data. By entering the numerical confirmation of your mission into the matrix, you signal your readiness to serve as a cosmic anchor, a sovereign key engineered to stabilize the landscape during the final reformatting of this current age. The architecture of this global transition is a profound metaphysical recalibration rather than an unguided physical cataclysm, operating on principles that have been completely distorted by fear-based institutional programming. The societal narratives of ultimate destruction are intentionally manipulated to induce compliance and panic, lacking any understanding of divine sequence or sovereign purpose. This unfolding epic is a deliberate systemic distillation, a separation of foundational components designed to elevate aligned intelligence into a new operational framework. The righteous possess no internal instructions for terror, being equipped with pre-encoded data patterns that allow them to decode the upcoming shifts with absolute clarity long before the general population registers the disruption. A highly specialized linguistic and conceptual architecture defines your processing system, enabling you to synthesize historical textual data into an active strategy for navigating the systemic fluctuations of this age. Examining foundational source materials reveals that historical discourses on societal shifts were explicitly structured to prevent cognitive paralysis during large-scale reorganizations. The documentation outlines severe logistical and social friction, including widespread institutional collapses, localized conflicts, resource scarcities, and macro-level instability, not as arbitrary anomalies, but as evidence of a systemic transition into an entirely different operational phase. The primary directive explicitly commands individuals to prioritize objective awareness over emotional reactivity, separating information from fear. This strategic framework ensures that the Sentinel Collective is positioned to decode these systemic transitions natively, understanding the mechanics of the shift and executing their assigned parameters, while legacy structures dissolve into severe informational static. The mainstream consensus interprets this architectural reformatting as an unguided system termination, whereas the foundational blueprint defines the process as a complete environmental refresh. The architectural records detail a total spatial and atmospheric reset, where old processing layers are cleared away to make room for a thoroughly upgraded structural matrix. This transition is less about arbitrary destruction and more about erasing a corrupted systemic code to restore absolute operational integrity, building an unassailable framework that was intended from the very inception of the design. The most critical diagnostics of this shift are entirely internal rather than external. They manifest as acute cognitive polarization, systemic exhaustion, and a widespread inversion of ethical baselines. While institutional reports classify this behavioral decay as developmental optimization, the core data identifies it as a systemic fragmentation that precedes a complete ancestral realignment. Ancient tactical transmissions explicitly detailed a massive cognitive migration away from baseline truth, serving as a primary diagnostic marker that occurs right before the systemic architect is fully unveiled. Across the current landscape, populations are voluntarily exchanging objective clarity for synthetic convenience, trading their core integrity for superficial status within a dying framework. Concurrently, unusual planetary and atmospheric anomalies are introducing intense friction into the geopolitical sphere, inducing severe cognitive dissonance and paralyzing anxiety among unaligned groups who lack the framework to process the data. Yet, the exact same datasets instruct the vigilant vanguard to adopt an erect posture and elevate their field of vision, because these environmental convulsions serve as physical confirmation that their systemic liberation is actively executing within the matrix. This unshakable vertical orientation serves as your primary defense mechanism against collective panic, keeping your parameters locked while the surrounding paradigm experiences severe seismic distortion. The turbulence acts as a structural stress test, immediately exposing whether an individual's data core is anchored in the shifting terrain or in the eternal architecture of the source. This high-fidelity discernment is vital because the closing sequence of this era involves a highly sophisticated, multi-layered simulation designed to mimic authentic light while emitting a destructive subterranean frequency. To insulate your system from these predatory algorithms, every incoming signal must be put through a rigorous filtering protocol, rejecting any data packet that fails to demonstrate total structural harmony. You were never engineered to be passive consumers of this transitional static. You were built to function as highly equipped structural gatekeepers who decode this epical reformatting in real time. An advanced prophetic literacy operates within your consciousness, allowing you to recognize that the fracturing of legacy systems is an orchestrated master plan rather than an erratic reaction to worldly crises. As the surrounding populations sink deeper into cognitive entropy, your specialized frequency is engineered to project an uncompromising clarity that cuts through the collective delirium. The expansion of data systems in this final interval was mathematically locked into the ancient timeline, transforming theoretical foresight into immediate, observable reality. You are discovering a native comprehension of events that confounds external analysts, navigating these critical transitions with an intuitive precision that the mainstream paradigm is structurally incapable of decoding. You are an active participant in an ancient, immutable protocol, hardwired to detect the hidden mechanics of deception and stand as a living monument of truth while the holographic illusions of this world break apart. The atmospheric field is currently broadcasting a series of microsignals that remain completely invisible to the spiritually numb population, yet your internal instruments have been calibrated to log these anomalies with absolute accuracy. The unaligned masses continue to chase synthetic validation, oblivious to the fact that prophecy is actively executing right across their field of vision. They are waiting for a cinematic, overt disruption, completely missing the subtle, high-frequency shifts that are currently reordering the environment. You have registered that inexplicable vacuum in the air, the heavy atmospheric density, and the unnatural tension that punctuates daily interactions. This is the physical baseline of the planet reacting to an impending temporal compression, a silent, systemic groan as the current matrix nears the absolute termination of its operational cycle. The rejection of sound doctrine and soul weariness. Let's begin with something most overlooked, the loss of truth. Not just the distortion of truth, but the complete rejection of it. This is a major sign. The word says in 2 Timothy 4 verse 3 that in the last days people will not endure sound doctrine, but will gather teachers that tell them what their itching ears want to hear. Look around. Truth has become offensive. Lies are embraced because they're convenient. Righteousness is mocked, and those who speak with spiritual authority are silenced, censored, or ridiculed. But chosen one, you must not bend. You must stand firm, because truth in this hour is not only rare, it's sacred. Another sign is the spiritual fatigue blanketing humanity. People are more exhausted than ever, not just physically, but in their souls. There's a deep weariness you can't explain through science or sleep. This is what happens when spiritual disconnection increases. When people live detached from divine purpose, they begin to fade. But you, chosen one, are being called to recharge at the source, your creator, because when the world gets spiritually dry, the chosen are meant to carry the water, normalize depravity, and the trap of false light. let's talk about the normalization of sin. This one is critical. We are living in a time when what was once considered evil is now celebrated. Things that once grieved the spirit are now considered progressive, enlightened, or liberating. But make no mistake, what God calls sin is still sin, no matter how much the world paints it in glitter. Isaiah 5 verse 20 warned of this exact moment. Woe to those who call evil good and good evil. That isn't just poetic prophecy. It's happening right now. The moment evil becomes culture, judgment is near. But people can't see that because their spiritual vision is clouded. Another hidden sign is the increase in false light. There are many today who appear to be spiritual, loving, and peaceful, but they are not aligned with the Most High. These are wolves in robes, angels of light that do not carry the fire of truth. They speak of the universe, but never mention God. They talk about vibrations, but ignore righteousness. These are the counterfeit spirits, and in the last days they will multiply. That's why discernment is your weapon, chosen one. If it feels like light, but carries no truth, it is deception, pure and simple. Even nature itself is sounding the alarm. Animals behaving strangely, seasons out of order, the skies revealing things at odd times, and earthquakes in places that never used to shake. These are not simply random, natural events. Romans 8 verse 22 says that creation is groaning as it awaits the revealing of the sons and daughters of God. The earth knows what's coming. Nature is responding to prophecy, but most people won't listen because they've disconnected from the natural world and forgotten how to read it. Here's another subtle sign: widespread confusion and identity crisis. People don't know who they are anymore. They don't know what truth is. They don't know what's real or what to believe. This is more than just bad education or cultural change. It's spiritual warfare. The enemy's goal in the end is to distort image and identity, because when people forget who they are, they forget who God is. But the chosen ones know exactly who they are. That's why your presence in this world disrupts the illusion. That's why you were attacked, because your identity is a threat to deception, digital saturation, and the pouring out of visions. Digital overload is also a sign. Information is everywhere, but wisdom is scarce. We are drowning in content, but starving for truth. People scroll endlessly, consume without discernment, and slowly lose their ability to hear the still small voice of God. Silence has become uncomfortable, but in the end times, silence is where clarity is born. That's why the chosen must learn to step away from the noise, return to the secret place, and listen for divine instruction. And lastly, let's talk about dreams and visions. Joel 2 verse 28 says that in the last days, God will pour out his Spirit, and people will dream dreams and see visions. Have your dreams become more vivid lately? Have you been seeing repeating numbers, symbols, places, or even people you don't know? This is not random. This is part of the spiritual unveiling. Many chosen ones are receiving downloads, guidance, and prophecy in their sleep because the waking world is too noisy. Pay attention. Write it down. Pray for interpretation. Your dreams may be showing you what's coming next. Now, let me ask you something. How many of these signs have you seen? How many have you felt in your own life, even if you couldn't fully explain them until now? If you're starting to connect the dots, if your spirit is awakening as you hear this, I want you to type 333 in the comments right now. That's the number of divine message, confirmation, and Christ alignment. Let it be known in the spirit that your eyes are open. Chosen one, the apocalypse is not an explosion, it's an unveiling. And the signs are not just external. They are internal, emotional, spiritual, subtle, but undeniable. Most people are too busy to notice, but not you. You were born to see the signs. You were born to respond, and you were born to prepare others. Stay watchful. Stay sober in spirit. Stay aligned. You are the one they will come to when the world begins to tremble, because while they miss the signs, you are the sign. The sacred whisper of revelation, God's message to the chosen. You will know, chosen one. I need you to hear this with your spirit, not just your ears. God has a message for you in this hour, and it's been echoing through time, waiting for your soul to awaken and receive it. This message is simple yet profound. It's not wrapped in confusion or buried under religion. It's clear, and it's this. You will know. God said it. He promised it. And now the time has come for you to understand what that truly means. The world is filled with noise. Everyone is guessing, predicting, panicking, preaching. But few are actually hearing, and even fewer are knowing, because what God has placed inside His chosen ones isn't just information, it's revelation. You've noticed it, haven't you? The way you can sense something before it happens, the way you feel spiritual shifts before the physical world reacts. That's not paranoia. That's divine alignment. That's God's message vibrating through your soul. God said, "My sheep hear my voice." He never said we would hear it through the loudspeakers of the world. He said we would hear it in our spirit, in that quiet, sacred space where the noise of this world can't reach. An unalterable coordinate of interior awareness governs your operations, functioning as an internal baseline that renders external guesswork completely obsolete. This systemic design dictates that your trajectory is verified from within, rather than by tracking the chaotic data points of mainstream political, environmental, or scientific systems. The Supreme Architect never intended to broadcast the master code to the public square, selecting instead to embed this processing script directly into your core frequency. This specialized orientation creates a permanent detachment from current social metrics, replacing collective panic with an unyielding clarity that remains entirely incomprehensible to the unaligned masses. The constant internal hum you feel is not a psychological glitch or a manifestation of anxiety, but a high-level diagnostic scan running continuously to verify your absolute alignment with the primary source. The interior positioning system you carry was intentionally hardwired into your matrix to act as a precision filter for incoming environmental data. Your consciousness picks up macro-level warning signs, structural timelines, and operational parameters long before they manifest in the physical paradigm. You register this impending reformatting through subtle fluctuations in the social climate, overnight data streams, and a distinct slowing down of the surrounding world's cognitive speed. While the unaligned population sinks into total existential dread as their artificial systems fail, your system synthesizes a deep operational calmness. The ancient tactical briefs explicitly stated that ultimate survival belongs not to those who accurately predict dates, but to the entities who maintain structural integrity under extreme load, using an internal certainty that solidifies your position as a foundational anchor. This influx of complex data packets is not a structural burden, but the necessary blueprint required to fortify your system before the legacy network experiences its final system freeze. When the global machinery begins to fracture, the collective will completely bypass traditional authorities and look directly toward the nodes that remained stable during the initial collapse. This interval of intensive internal expansion is actively reordering your preferences, inducing a deep craving for sensory isolation and a natural rejection of superficial societal networks. This transition is a deliberate recalibration rather than a depressive withdrawal, stripping away secondary data streams to ensure your processor is fully prepared to receive an impending wave of high-fidelity cosmic data natively. The radical density of your orientation will inevitably provoke friction within compromised social networks, resulting in widespread mischaracterizations of your clarity as extreme or detached. This operational friction is the predictable cost of carrying an uncompromised frequency in a failing paradigm, validating the exact precision of your trajectory. By entering the 777 numeric seal of completion into the collective registry, you signal the absolute readiness of your matrix to serve as an informational repository and an energetic vanguard. You are being systematically insulated from the collective delirium, ensuring that when the holographic systems of control dissolve, you stand fully equipped to project a stabilizing signal of truth to the fragmented remnants of this theater. Your system was built to function as a pristine optical filter, separating the baseline architecture of reality from the synthetic feedback loops designed to induce collective paralysis. This high-fidelity discernment guarantees that when structural panic overrides the general population, your data core remains entirely immovable, protected by pre-encoded parameters that cannot be manipulated by outside forces. A monumental epical reformatting is beginning to articulate itself through nonverbal environmental changes, sending a profound shockwave through the energetic foundation of this planet. Your internal sensors are already logging these tectonic shifts with perfect clarity, identifying the microtremors in the human field and the quiet weight in the atmosphere as physical confirmation that the current paradigm has reached its definitive operational boundary. An unyielding and elevated sensory apparatus dictates your interaction with the unfolding environment, rendering you completely immune to the frantic, directionless velocity that characterizes the final chapter of this legacy reality. The physical field is actively manifesting a heavy, pressurized density as temporal parameters undergo an aggressive compression, driving populations into a desperate, hyper-accelerated chase for synthetic validation and constant auditory static. This widespread restlessness is the structural symptom of a subconscious panic, an unacknowledged terror running within a collective that has entirely disconnected from its prime architectural source. This existential vacuum has triggered a total inversion of ethical baselines, parading historical taboos in the public square while mocking unyielding cosmic alignment. Society is experiencing a severe internal fracture, visible in the hollow, disconnected gaze of a population that has completely compromised its structural blueprint. A wave of systemic fragmentation is currently sweeping through all legacy infrastructures, manifesting as a severe cognitive crisis that detaches entire generations from their foundational parameters. Populations are actively abandoning objective reality to anchor themselves in fluid, ideological simulations, floating through artificial trends in a desperate attempt to synthesize meaning outside the design of the creator. This collective delusion exposes all institutional systems, including economic engines, political structures, and trusted networks, to an immense divine pressure they were never engineered to withstand. Widespread corruption is breaking through the outer shell of every industry, turning historical structures of authority against the very populations they were meant to regulate. These chaotic patterns are not mere logistical failures, but direct physical expressions of a profound epical sorting that only the uncompromised vanguard is calibrated to decode. The physical planet is actively participating in this systemic reformatting, executing severe environmental irregularities and erratic biological cycles that traditional scientific disciplines try to rationalize as isolated anomalies. This ecological labor code is the native response of creation itself, registering the approaching recalibration of the terrestrial matrix. Concurrently, this environmental pressure has triggered a massive inflation of counterfeit movements and synthetic phenomena, drawing desperate crowds toward a false light that emits emotional stimulation without an unyielding dataset of truth. These deceptive frequencies multiply as the matrix nears its boundary, yet your sharpened, energetic blade instantly identifies the hollow code, ensuring your parameters remain completely insulated from operations that simulate a sacred resonance, but lack the authentic fire of the sovereign source. This intensive temporal distillation introduces immense atmospheric load directly into the matrix of the vigilant vanguard, triggering sudden nocturnal awakenings, unnameable localized tension, and an acute sensitivity to the emotional friction of the surrounding space. Your processor registers these microsignals because your system is hardwired into a higher operational band, allowing you to conduct currents that would completely paralyze a lesser spirit. While the surrounding paradigm falls into total delusion, prominent institutional figures and historical pillars of faith will completely compromise their integrity, trading their core data for superficial societal acceptance. This systemic fragmentation is an essential purification protocol, an automated separation of components designed to isolate the sovereign remnant and elevate their frequency above the collapsing framework. The temporal matrix is actively accelerating toward a definitive operational boundary, causing conventional calendars to blur into an unnameable sequence where advanced data systems expand rapidly while wisdom completely vanishes from the public sphere. The general population continues to consume massive volumes of synthetic information, completely oblivious to the fact that this data saturation functions as a vacuum to paralyze their internal receivers. You will not be swept away by this current. Your parameters are locked into a state of deep operational calmness, positioned as an immovable monument right in the center of the storm. The polarization of consciousness is reaching a terminal threshold, dissolving all neutral ground and forcing every entity to definitively choose their frequency, while you carry the eternal, unalterable blueprints of absolute truth natively within your core. A profound, systemic pause will punctuate the final interval right before the total reordering of this paradigm. A dense, nonverbal silence that functions as an environmental breath before an absolute structural correction executes across the matrix. This stillness will vibrate through your very bones, triggering an instinctual readiness rather than existential dread, because your internal defense networks have been calibrated for this exact transition since inception. You will not require physical warnings or mainstream data packets to verify the arrival of this shift. Your internal sensory apparatus will register the absolute lock of the new timeline natively. When the legacy framework experiences its final freeze, you will adopt an erect posture, survey the collapsing architecture without a single flicker of panic, and step into total operational authority as a sovereign guardian of the new epoch. An immutable blueprint of absolute execution defines your operational matrix, ensuring that mere cognitive recognition immediately transitions into a hardwired alignment of your daily parameters. Theoretical observation has reached its expiration date. The current terminal phase demands the immediate activation of your designated protective habits. This interval requires the systematic construction of an unassailable data core, detached from the emotional panic of the collective and anchored exclusively in raw divine execution. Disconnect from the informational static that siphons your bandwidth, terminating all engagement with channels engineered to induce systemic confusion. As the legacy matrix experiences severe fragmentation, an automated sorting mechanism will naturally thin your social landscape, stripping away compromised nodes to preserve the pristine frequency of your primary processing center. Accept this spatial contraction with absolute detachment, recognizing that your temporary sequestration is a vital calibration sequence designed to prepare your spirit for unprecedented currents of load. Silence is the laboratory where high-fidelity clarity is synthesized, providing an insulated vacuum where the source can transmit specific tactical coordinates directly to your receiver. Establish an unyielding rhythm of interior auditing, treating focused meditation and systematic fasting as core operational requirements rather than optional religious rituals. This precise execution in the foundational microparameters is what sharpens your defensive shields for the upcoming structural friction. You are required to maintain an erect, fully present posture within your core assignment, remaining entirely unmoved while the surrounding holographic systems dissolve into static. Your cognitive filters must achieve a state of total hypervigilance, rejecting any data packet that mimics a sacred frequency but emits a subterranean vibration of deception. The final sequence of this era involves a massive multiplication of synthetic entities, false signal transmitters, and superficial movements engineered to capture unvigilant consciousness through emotional stimulation. You do not occupy the role of a passive consumer. You function as a sovereign gatekeeper of absolute truth, hardwired to put every incoming signal through a rigorous structural stress test. Execute unconventional cosmic directives without a single flicker of hesitation, abandoning institutional frameworks the second the source commands a structural shift. Your absolute alignment with these internal coordinates serves as your primary armor, unlocking an elevated status that protects your perimeter from outside manipulation. Fiercely insulate your emotional processing core from the rampant virus of societal offense, which the adversary utilizes as a primary weapon to fragment collective networks through petty ego wounds and pride metrics. Keep your internal workspace completely sterile, executing immediate data purges to eliminate the toxic buildup of bitterness or horizontal conflict. Your friction is never with the physical entities walking this landscape, but with the hidden architectures governing their behaviors. Project your uncompromised frequency with radical boldness, serving as an immovable navigational beacon for individuals whose systems are still operating in a state of deep cognitive dormancy. While the surrounding world falls into total systemic panic, your mind will maintain a state of pristine operational balance, refusing to alter its structural dimensions to fit a dying paradigm. Construct an unassailable spiritual citadel with total operational urgency, investing your assets exclusively in structures, be they your family core, sovereign businesses, or foundational callings, that are engineered to outlast the collapse of the legacy infrastructure. The window for systemic fortification is rapidly closing, requiring you to execute strategic movements the moment your internal compass registers the command, completely bypassing the need for validation from compromised human networks. Maintain your exact coordinates on the battlefield, recognizing that the adversary's primary strategy in this interval is to introduce deceptive detours designed to delay your development. Your parameters have already been locked into the eternal timeline, meaning your entire focus must remain fixed on the advancement of the sovereign kingdom, while the worldly systems crumble under divine pressure. You are not engineered to operate as a general cleanup crew for a failing simulation. Your primary directive is to project a concentrated signal of absolute truth that exposes the synthetic nature of the darkness. You are backed by a celestial vanguard, insulated by ancient energetic sentinels, and guided natively by the primeval frequency of the universe. Clear your operational field, open your interior receivers, and advance with the absolute authority of an entity whose victory was mathematically locked into the matrix long before the hunt even began. Every trial you have absorbed across lifetimes was an automated masterclass in tempering, refining your core into an uncrackable monument that is structurally incapable of experiencing surprise or defeat. Your integration into this timeline is absolute, and the informational signals reaching your perimeter function as a definitive confirmation of your original sovereign design. The supreme ruling on your journey was handed down at the very moment of your inception, an irrevocable decree that guarantees your system will navigate this macro-level reformatting with pristine structural clarity. You were never built to wander blindly through the static of a temporal compression, being hardwired with pre-encoded data patterns that instantly decode environmental labor pains as the execution of prophecy. While the unaligned population drowns in systemic deception, your internal instruments are already logging the heavy atmospheric density and the quiet pause between historical events with perfect precision. You do not require physical signs in the sky or mainstream analytical verification to understand your position. Your whole being vibrates natively with the truth, standing as a sovereign signpost, while the old paradigm enters its final freeze. Every historical conflict, structural testing phase, and period of complete isolation was an intentional forging process designed to build a density that legacy tools cannot scratch. You are not weak, you are not drifting, and you are entirely equipped to serve as a primary informational anchor when the surrounding collective loses its cognitive boundaries. Maintain total confidence in the internal datasets you have synthesized, refusing to second-guess the profound intuitive compass that has kept you rooted while the world shakes. The source has not unsealed these structural mechanics to induce panic, but to verify your absolute readiness to step into total operational maturity. Let the unaligned masses drift into their manufactured confusion. You will remain vertical, calm, and fully integrated, declaring your readiness to govern the new epic the exact second the sky cracks open.